occurred to me that in my last, I don't know if you want to call this a podcast or whatever, but video in which I speak and there's a picture depicting whatever it is I'm talking about. In that last one, when I was discussing the reason why I don't watch television anymore, I had brought up myself discovering a book called The Lost World by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and how it basically caused me to become a writer and basically write my own version of the story. And I went a little bit in depth into it, but obviously that video was about another topic entirely, so I couldn't necessarily stay on that topic for very long. I figured I may as well do it here, since I have a few minutes before I go run an errand. I tried filming this earlier, but for some reason or other, I came down with this very awful sinus infection and was very congested, and was sneezing and such, and had all this phlegm in my throat and was hacking up stuff. I seem to be better now, so we'll go ahead and proceed. So, as you know, from, I suppose, basically, from the time that I could basically learn to read up until 2013, I was very averse to reading, and would actually, I suppose, in order to placate the needs of these teachers who required you to read in something called sustained reading periods, I would basically take a book, any book, it doesn't matter which book, and open it to a random page, or I would start at the beginning. I'd stay on that page for about a minute, just looking at it, staring at it, and then turn the page, stare at those for about a minute or two, turn the page, and then just keep going until the reading period was over. And, you know, when I did finish books, they'd ask me how it was, and I'd say, well, it was good. You know, sort of just give that response because I didn't read the bloody thing. What other response am I going to give? So I kept doing that for a while and actually read quite a bit of juvenile fiction that way. It's nothing really special that I read that way. Nothing that will be remembered in 100 years. Although I must say, I did read The Book Thief by Markus Zusak that way. I did get a fair grasp of it because I had to do a book report on it. But I may need to reread it because Ahab has been telling me it's actually quite good. I'm very much opposed to Holocaust era literature, not because of the subject matter, but just because I don't think it's executed all that well. It's mostly Jesuits who tend to write this material. Nothing against them, but it just doesn't seem to be really that captivating the way it is written. But apparently Ahab thinks that The Book Thief is, so, but this isn't a video about The Book Thief, this is a video about The Lost World, so I'm going to keep on topic. So, I kept reading that way for a while until, like I mentioned, for a bit I was watching DVDs exclusively from about 2012 to about 2016 or so, one of those. And one of the DVDs I had was of the original 1933 King Kong, a 2-disc box set with a 7-part documentary on the making of the film. And it mentioned in that documentary that Willis O'Brien, the man who was behind the revolutionary stop-motion animation effects that brought Kong to life, was involved with a project 8 years prior called The Lost World. And I had known of this project because in the Jurassic Park documentary, the making of documentary narrated by James Earl Jones, he had mentioned that the first instance of dinosaurs on film was a film called The Lost World in 1925. And I assumed that was just its own film. And that Michael Crichton got inspiration to write his book, The Lost World, and the subsequent film that Spielberg made from that. Until I saw this documentary of King Kong, and it said that the author of the original story that was based on that film, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, he wrote this book called The Lost World, and he was so impressed with the effects of it that I think maybe like 3 or 4 years before the film debuted, he showed it to a convention of almost said magicians, because one of his friends and colleagues was Harry Houdini, and they all thought he claimed it to be real footage of dinosaurs. But then I started thinking to myself, who's Sir Arthur Conan Doyle? I had no idea that he was the author of Sherlock Holmes. I just noticed that, this very handsome-looking fellow with a very impressive moustache had written what is supposedly the first instance in which dinosaurs were mentioned in fiction. And Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne, or Jules Verne, however you say his name, does not count, because those are not dinosaurs. Those are ichthyoid creatures that were around during the period of dinosaurs, yes, but they are not dinosaurs themselves, and also there are megafauna in that too. Conan Doyle was the first one to include dinosaurs in a work of fiction, in a natural setting. And I know that there was an earlier book called Beyond the Great Wall or something like that, set in Antarctica. I've not read that. It's probably rubbish. But this is the first one, to my knowledge, that included the dinosaur in mainstream fiction. Let's just say that. So anyway, I buy a copy of this book and decide I want to read it. Of course, at the time, the only reading I was doing was basically just staring at pages. And so I was reading it, and, was finding it to be okay. I got a couple things from it, I saw names like Challenger and Roxton and all that type of stuff and all that. But then, I came across certain passages that sounded particularly interesting, like this one here in chapter 12, it was dreadful in the forest. I remembered again the blood-slobbered face which we had seen in the glare of Lord John's torch, like some horrible vision from the deepest circle of Dante's hell, and various passages like that. And I just found myself completely mystified by them. I had read them by accident, actually. And then, as I said, I was mystified by them. So much so that I had to go back and read the whole book by itself. And I just loved it to pieces. To use that cliche, I just loved it. I really did. I love it so much that I had decided actually to rewrite The Lost World, as my own type of story. And so, and it was about like 3 times as long as the original piece. The original Lost World is like 160, 150 pages, maybe 200 if you put it in like a big hardcover or something like that, hardback book, whatever those are. But this one was like almost like 800 pages, this one. It was so ridiculous. But anyway, and so in this book, it was set around the same time, but all of the characters from the original, such as, Challenger, Summerlee, Roxton, and Malone, they sort of took the back seat of the narrative. And I think, I'll get into that here pretty soon. So they took the back seat, and basically the main focus of this narrative was the leader of the expedition, who was, I kid you not, Pee Wee Herman. But I actually, in order to not seem stupid or anything like that, I referred to him as Peter W. Herman, and he was the great-grandfather or something of Pee Wee or whatever. I don't know, some stupid balderdash like that. But anyway, he was a leader of the expedition. He wore like this Australian hat that was bent to one side and all that, and it was like a sharpshooter or something or of that order. Like a Carl Denham type of a character, really. Not at all like Challenger. But anyway, and then also there was this one girl in this narrative, which I mentioned, who was based off of one of those characters played by Ariana Grande. You know who Ariana Grande is. She's a very famous singer-songwriter. She's got this momentous fortune. She's been made an honorary citizen of Great Britain. For some reason, I believe it had to do with, I don't know, some or another business in Manchester. I don't know. But she's very famous. But prior to her music career, she was in with Nickelodeon. One of these series, she played a character. I can't remember the character's name. I believe the series was Victorious. That's what it was called. And it was produced by that pervert television maven, Dan Schneider, who may be the subject of another video. I'm not too sure. But anyway, one of the characters in there was played by her, and she spoke in this like childlike voice, even though she was a teenager, and had the red dyed hair. And basically I sort of adapted her into the fiction as a character. So she was in there, and apparently I learned this from reading somewhere or other. I don't quite remember where I read this, some type of fiction. But apparently women actually dyed their hair in the Edwardian period, or even the Victorian period. So I was right in that respect. I was right. I didn't know I was right, but I was. Anyway, she was in it, and then there was also Rikki Tikki Tavi. Yes, a mongoose. And I made him talk and such and all that. From The Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling, he was in there for some reason. And then the entire cast of Gilligan's Island was in there, just as, you know, just because that was what I was into at the time. Because I used to watch Gilligan's Island quite a lot when I was 12, 13 and all that. And I decided, hey, they may as well be in there, why not? And I believe actually the professor was Challenger. I know in this series his name was actually Leonard Meekley. If you don't know that, the professor from Gilligan's Island was named Leonard Meekley. But I just gave him the name of Challenger because, hey, he's a professor, why not? And then basically that's all he was, reduced. He was just reduced to that. Instead of being this real bombastic, larger-than-life curmudgeon that he is in the Conan Doyle book, I just made him a Professor Leonard Meekley. Or Roland Meekley, I don't remember his name. But anyway, so all that cast was there and such. Jonathan Harker from Dracula was in there for some bloody reason. I have no idea why. I think maybe even Mina was in there as well, but all that, I don't know. And then, finally, the star of the show. He was the main hero of this whole narrative. Alf, or Gordon Shumway, as Professor Alf. And he wore tweeds and such and all that, and this bowler, and had this ridiculous bubble pipe. He wouldn't smoke a pipe. He'd actually just blow bubbles with it. It was pretty absurd. I actually painted a picture of him, and I may even post, that may even be the picture that comes up here that I'm speaking under. So yeah, we'll see that. Anyway, so that was the main cast of the narrative. That was the main party. And then also, I guess I can bring up the proportions of the plateau. In the original novel, it was said to be about the size of an English county, which, you know, is relatively large. But I kind of, made it bigger, even bigger. Maybe it's the size of a small country like Liechtenstein or something like that. There were about maybe 5 or 6 specific order of dinosaur in the Conan Doyle book. In this, I decided to put every single species of dinosaur known to the fossil record at the time on this plateau. Every single one that you could possibly think of was on there, in there, whatever. And I even made up creatures and such and put them in there. I don't even remember what most of these creatures were, but I made them up. And also there was this one odd creature from this one animated film that I believe was called The Croods. It was basically it wasn't a name thing. It was like the Flintstones, but not really. I don't know. It was pretty bad. But there was this one creature called, well, it was a mix between a bear, a panther, and an owl, and I believe it was called a bear owl. And I had it be among the first things that they encounter on this plateau was this bear owl, and it would be like that one scene in Avatar, the James Cameron film that took eons to make, where somebody would be chased by it and such and all that, and it was just, I don't know, weird. That was the only time you saw it, I think. Or no, you saw it one more time. That was when they were getting off the plane. Anyway, that was in there. There were retractable plants as well that were in there. And just about any cliche from dinosaur media was on this plateau. I guess I thought that, since it was the first dinosaur story, I may as well put everything that was in dinosaur-related films or literature in there, because basically that's from where it originated, so I thought I may as well do that. That's how I thought back then. And then there was also this weird eagle in there too that practiced voodoo, who was based on that one eagle from the Dr. Seuss book, Horton Hears a Who. I believe his name was Vlad, or something like that. And he just practiced voodoo. I don't know what I was thinking of at the time. I wasn't on any drugs or narcotics or edibles or anything like that. It's just, I don't know, strange, machinations of a prepubescent mind. I'm not too sure really what it was. But anyway, now, also in the Conan Doyle book, there is a very prominent portion dedicated to a conflict between ape men and a race of Indians that are both on the plateau. And I had taken note of this when I read it the first time. And if you want to know how I made the Indian, basically, the Indians were not on the plateau whatsoever in my book. They were basically on the land surrounding it. And I basically, since I heard the word Indians, I just immediately thought of cowboys and Indians, like in, something like in Hondo or some other John Wayne type of movie, like Apaches or Comanches or Cherokee, something like that. That's how I portrayed these things. People. That's what I meant. And then the ape men, Ahab is going to blush when he hears this. The ape men I portrayed because at the time I had been a very big fan of the Mel Gibson movie Apocalypto, about, basically the Mayans and how they would take inferior tribes and such and sacrifice them to their various gods and such and all that. And I believe there was an eclipse or something or other, and that sort of ushered in the Spanish conquest of Central America and all that. But anyway, that film was very violent, and I was captivated by the nature of these these Mayan peoples who would just slaughter these inferior races and would, sacrifice them up at the top of pyramids, rip out their hearts, and then chop off their heads, and then roll them down the side of a pyramid, and then there was this very large pile of corpses at the bottom and such and all that. I basically made the ape men like that. Yes, they were advanced to that stage, because I know basically in the Conan Doyle book they were savages. They weren't cavemen. I mean, they had clubs and such and spears and all, but they were basically like, Dryopithecus or Pithecanthropus, those things. Actually, fun fact, one of the greatest moments in Conan Doyle's book, The Land of Mist, that homage the Lost World real well, which I forgot to mention in my review of the Challenger stories, was when Malone, Edna, I think her name was Edna Challenger. Now I'm going to look this up too. Is it Edna? Enid, that's who it was, Enid. Or no, it wasn't even Enid, was it Rothschild? I don't remember who it was. They were in some seance or other in France, and basically this medium conjured up a Pithecanthropus, an ape man, in front of them, and it was basically like fooling around and such and all that. That's one of the greatest homages in anybody's own canon that I've ever read. Anyway, so I made the ape man like that. Advanced people who would just cut out people's hearts and all that, and they rode on entelodonts and such, and other types of quadruped mammals. And there's even scenes in this book where they would come and butcher all these Indians, like, those warriors from 10,000 BC, if you ever saw that film. It wasn't that good, but there were some good qualities to it that I liked. So I decided to implement that in there. And that's basically how I made the ape men and Indians. And there was also, I think, a gorilla in there at one point, because I made, Gilligan's Island, there was like a gorilla in a certain episode, so I decided to put a gorilla in there. I don't know why I did that, but, whatever. And so basically I made that book. It was in fragments and such and all that. I wrote certain bits here and there and all that, and focused on more bits than others. And I believe, that was basically the plateau and all that, the Lost World bits of it. And of course, there was like 85 pages on the ship, because I was real into Peter Jackson's King Kong at the time. There was this needless character development and all that, which should have happened later in the narrative, but, I was, I don't know. Anyway, I believe that Peter W. Herman had taken back to London. I believe it was London that they went to. Obviously, it was London in the original, but I think it was London that they went to in mine. He took back, I think, an Allosaurus, and, he showed it to people and it got loose and all that, and this is really stupid. Rikki Tikki Tavi, the mongoose, yes, actually procures a toy car. And as I suppose, kind of like a diversion, he basically lets the Allosaur chase him in the toy car. Yeah, it was pretty stupid. And I don't remember exactly how the book ends. I don't quite remember how that is. I lost the manuscript many years ago. It's probably somewhere in my closet at my parents' house. I don't really know where it is. And I could dig it out, but I'm not too sure. We'll see about that. Anyway, so that was Alf's Lost World, I guess you can call it. But then also, because I had so liked this concept and such, and also it hinted that there would be a sequel to Conan Doyle's Lost World. At the very end, Roxton, for those of you who have not read it, you can go ahead and either mute this or just look away or something until I've finished. But at the end, the very end of the novel, Roxton shows to his group of friends who are now settled down in London some very precious diamonds that he had got from the plateau, which were like very valuable and such and all that. I think they were called, what is it? They were called, well, whatever they were called. They were very precious stones that he found in the swamp of the pterodactyls. But he basically said he'd give 50,000 to everyone, and with his 50,000, he would go back to the plateau in order to, get more of these diamonds. And basically, he asked Malone whether he'd go with him, and Malone had said, "Sure, I'll do that." But obviously, a direct sequel to The Lost World was never written. I guess you could call sequel was The Poison Belt, which is not at all about The Lost World. There's one brief mention of it, but it's not about dinosaurs whatsoever. It's basically, I did a review of it, you know what it's about. Anyway, so that kind of had me interested, and I also decided to but I just got like 12 or so journals and wrote the basis for like 11 sequels to this ridiculous Lost World thing. And I believe one was set in China, one was set in Africa, one was set in South America again, one was even set in Cuba, of all places. Yes, Cuba. In the year 2012. Goodness gracious. It went on for that long, my word. And I would even incorporate into this series elements of the Lost World television series that came out in the early 2000s. You know the one I'm talking about, the one with, what's his name? Michael Sinelikoff, who was in the horrid 1998 film of Summerlee, but he's Summerlee in that. You know the one I'm talking about, the one where it's kind of like Xena, the warrior princess, but except it's a Lost World. And, I just incorporated all the stuff that was in there. I think there were like lizard people and headhunters and like Greek people and stuff, all sorts of weird type of, even vampires, goodness gracious. There was even a palace at the part of the plateau where there were vampires. There was a lot of crazy, wacky stuff in that series. I've got to rewatch that series. It's on Amazon Prime. You know what? I'm going to rewatch that series. The whole series is on Amazon Prime for free. Prime Video for free. I'm going to go ahead and rewatch it and maybe do a review of it, because in my review of all those adaptations, whatever you want to call them, with The Lost World, I neglected to touch on the TV series, because I haven't seen the whole of the TV series. I only saw the first few episodes. But I'll watch it all again. But anyway, all the elements from the television series were incorporated into the subsequent sequels. And I think even the second one, the one that was set in China, just had Professor Alf in there and such. And actually, it was kind of like the closest to Conan Doyle's book that there was. The closest, rendition of it that there was to that. I don't quite remember all the details, but I believe that Roxton fought a baryonyx, and that Alf was like on this island in the middle of a lake or something or other. I don't quite remember all the details behind it, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. But anyway, and also at the time, I was into, obviously, as you know, bigger women, so I put bigger women in these books and sequels and all that just for me. Nobody was ever going to buy these. No publishers that I could think could ever buy these. These would be like horrible smut and all that. It's just horrid. And, basically, there was like this weird thing where I would like see whatever dinosaur-related film. It could be like garbage, like something from the Sci-Fi Channel or something, and I just put it in there. I know I did that in the once when we were back in South America constantly. But anyway, the last one I think involved this like Foxman or something or other. That was from, I think, Peter Rabbit, and how he basically, I don't know, he was the reason why dinosaurs were on the earth when they first got onto the plateau. He like brought them back to life or something. I don't quite remember all the details behind it, but nonetheless, he dies the same way that the main villain of that Lone Ranger picture dies. The big train scene, the train chase scene, and he basically falls and is flattened by a train in Cuba. And basically Cuba was like a barren wasteland and such and all that, and I don't know. It's weird. But anyway, I lost most of the manuscript. I don't quite know where it is, but I do have one portion of it that I saved that I might read here pretty soon. I'm not sure when, but I'll read it, maybe live or on a pre-recorded video. And one more thing that I want to add before I go on this errand is that Maple White, the original founder of The Lost World, I had thought Maple was a girl's name, so basically I made him into a woman, and had her on the plateau in the first one, and I don't know, all kinds of weird shit in that. But anyway, I just thought I'd give you a more detailed rundown of my attempt to make my own Lost World and such. And I will actually make a sequel to this, because I'm going to tell you here shortly in one of these other videos what I think would be the best way to make a definitive adaptation of The Lost World, and also to expound upon the sequel that was proposed in the original narrative. So I don't know when that will come out. I may even record it after this, after I get back from my appointment. So stay tuned for that. And I hope you enjoyed this. And I hope you have a good day, morning, afternoon, evening, midnight, whenever you happen to be seeing this. And we'll see you here next time. Thank you for listening.